The station court was silent as the judges announced the sentence. The sound of their voices echoed through the wide metal chamber, cold and slow, like stones dropping into deep water. Rows of alien officials sat high above the floor, their faces unreadable, their eyes fixed on the one standing below them. No one else spoke. No one dared to move. Lena stood alone at the center of the court. Her hands were held together in front of her, not bound but trembling. Her skin carried a pale shade common to her people, and the faint markings on her arms showed the line of her family. She kept her head lowered, staring at the smooth floor beneath her feet. She knew the law. She knew the charge. And she knew she was innocent. The crime was said to be theft of restricted data. It was a serious charge on the station, one that carried punishment meant to teach fear. Lena had never touched the data. She had only been near the terminal when others fled. But the court did not care for doubt. It cared for order, for example, and for silence. The judges spoke of tradition. They spoke of balance. They spoke of how punishment must fall, even if truth did not fully rise. Lena listened, her breathing shallow, her heart heavy. The punishment would not end her life, but it would mark her forever. It would weaken her body and place shame on her family name. Her brothers would feel it across the stars. Around the chamber sat observers from many worlds. Traders, soldiers, officials, and travelers filled the benches. Most watched without emotion. Some looked away. None spoke. On this station, involvement was dangerous. Among them sat a human named Adam. Adam had arrived on the station only days earlier. He was not important. He had no title, no rank, and no power here. He wore simple clothing and kept to himself. He had come for work, not trouble. Yet as he watched the trial, something in him tightened. He studied Lena's face. He noticed the way her shoulders shook as she tried to stay still. He saw fear there, quiet but deep. Adam had seen that look before, back on Earth, in places where people had no voice. He did not know her name then. He did not know her world. But fear he understood. The judges finished speaking. One of them leaned forward and asked the final question as required by law. Was there anyone who would accept responsibility for the crime? Anyone who would step forward and take the punishment instead? The question was ritual. No one ever answered it. The chamber stayed silent. The officials already turned their thoughts toward closing the case. Lena closed her eyes. She felt the weight of the moment press down on her chest. Then Adam stood. The sound of his movement was small, but it felt loud in the still air. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. A low murmur passed through the room. Humans were rare on the station, and humans almost never spoke in court. Adam's heart raced as he stepped into the open space. He could feel the gaze of the judges settle on him, sharp and curious. He did not fully understand the punishment. He only knew it was wrong for it to fall on her. He spoke clearly, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. He said he would take responsibility. He said the punishment should fall on him instead. Lena looked up. Her eyes widened in shock. She stared at the stranger, unable to understand what she was hearing. Adam met her gaze for only a moment, then looked back at the judges. The chamber filled with quiet disbelief. The judges did not respond at once. They studied Adam as if trying to decide whether he was serious or simply foolish. No human had ever made such an offer before. Adam stood still, knowing that once spoken, his words could not be taken back. Whatever happened next would change everything. And the court began to listen. The judges warned him that no one survived such punishment easily. Their voices carried a calm certainty, not cruelty, but a weight that pressed on Adam's chest as he listened. They explained the process clearly, describing the steps of the trial that would test his body, his mind, and his very spirit. The punishment would last for hours, perhaps even longer than anyone had predicted. It was designed to break those who could not endure it, to strip them of pride and strength. Those who entered it often emerged changed forever, some hollowed by the strain, some broken entirely. Many never walked out at all. Adam stood perfectly still, listening to each word. He did not flinch, nor did he respond immediately. The chamber was quiet around him, the kind of silence that weighed on every person present, filling the space like a thick fog. His heart thumped in his chest, a steady, strong rhythm, but he kept his face calm. His hands hung loosely at his sides, though his fingers twitched slightly, betraying the nerves beneath his outward composure. He had made his choice. He had chosen to take this punishment, and he would not waver now. When the judges finished their warning, they asked him to speak. Adam's voice was clear and steady as he said he would take Lena's place. The words seemed simple, but in the quiet of the court, they struck like a thunderclap. The chamber stirred. Eyes widened. Heads turned. The alien officials who had overseen countless trials paused and looked at him with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Humans rarely, if ever, intervened in such matters, and never with such courage. Lena froze. Her mouth opened but no sound came. Shock, confusion, and a strange relief fought within her. She had never imagined anyone would do this for her. She had expected fear, shame, and solitude. She had expected punishment alone to fall on her shoulders. And now, a stranger, a human, was offering himself without hesitation. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed them against her chest, as though to steady her racing heart. Her brothers, watching through a secure channel far from the station, reacted differently. They were seasoned warriors, trained from childhood to face danger without doubt, yet even they felt a flicker of disbelief. The oldest brother's eyes narrowed as he spoke into the channel, his voice low and tense. "Has the human lost his mind?" he asked. "No one accepts another's punishment willingly. It is madness." The second brother shook his head, frowning. "It must be a trick," he said. "He will fail quickly. He cannot endure what awaits him." The youngest, usually the calmest of the three, said nothing, simply watching, his brow furrowed in thought. Even they could not predict the strange courage of this human. Back in the court, the judges conferred quietly among themselves. They had rules, yes, rules that allowed the transfer of punishment, but it had rarely, if ever, been used. Their law demanded responsibility, not mercy, and yet the humans' offer forced their hand. After a moment, they spoke again, explaining that Adam's choice was permitted and that Lena would be released from the punishment if he endured it. The chamber was heavy with tension as the words echoed. Lena felt her knees weaken. Relief mixed with fear. She did not know what to feel, only that her fate had changed in a single instant. Adam felt the weight of the chamber's gaze on him. He felt the eyes of every observer, alien and human alike, fixed upon him. Some stared in disbelief, some in curiosity, some in disapproval. He did not flinch. He did not lower his eyes. He simply nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement that he understood the challenge he had chosen. He glanced at Lena, who stared back with wide, tear-filled eyes. In that moment, their connection was brief but profound, a silent promise that he would endure no matter what. The guards moved closer, their heavy boots clanging softly against the metal floor. They carried restraint bands designed not to harm, but to hold the punished securely through the process. Adam allowed them to place the bands on his wrists, the cold metal tight against his skin. He swallowed a small lump in his throat and focused on his breathing. Each inhale, each exhale, grounded him. Each step toward the chamber's inner trial area reminded him that he had chosen this path willingly. There was no turning back. The judges gave final instructions. Adam would face a sequence of trials designed to test endurance, patience, and control. Some would be physical, requiring him to withstand pressure and fatigue. Some would challenge his mind, placing him in isolation or sensory deprivation. The court did not speak of cruelty, yet the very nature of the punishment was difficult enough to break even the strongest of species. And humans, the judges thought, were not built for this. Yet Adam's resolve remained. He did not fear the unknown entirely. Fear was present, but it was tempered by purpose. He reminded himself that he had chosen to stand here for Lena, that he had seen her fear and refused to allow it to dominate her life. He focused on that thought, letting it fortify him against the challenge to come. He would endure. He would not falter. Not for himself, but for another. Lena watched from her small place behind the line of observers. She wanted to speak, to protest, to stop him, but the court's rules forbade interference. She could do nothing but watch as Adam stepped forward, as the guards guided him into the trial area. Tears filled her eyes, but she kept silent. She felt a strange mixture of gratitude and fear, realizing how brave this human truly was. She did not fully understand him, but she knew that what he was doing went beyond any reason she could imagine. The punishment lasted through the night. The chamber was cold, dimly lit, and utterly silent except for the faint hum of the station's machinery. Adam stood in the center, his arms bound lightly by the restraint bands, but it was not the bands that weighed him down. It was the pressure of the trial itself, designed to test his body and mind to their limits. Each moment stretched, each second seemed longer than the last, as though time itself had slowed to witness the endurance of the punished. The first phase was physical. The floor beneath him shifted subtly, testing his balance and strength. Gravity fluctuated in small, almost imperceptible increments, but enough to make his legs quiver with effort. Adam adjusted his stance again and again, refusing to allow his body to falter. His muscles burned, each step feeling heavier than the one before, yet he reminded himself that he had chosen this. He had chosen to protect Lena. That thought carried him forward, though his body screamed in protest. The chamber was silent, but Adam could feel the gaze of the judges and observers pressing down upon him. He could sense their curiosity, their doubt, and their expectation that he would fail quickly. He could feel the subtle vibrations of tension in the room. Yet he did not look at them. He kept his eyes focused on the faint light on the opposite wall, a small point to fix his mind. Every second he endured was a refusal to let fear control him. Lena watched from her place behind the observation screen. She could not intervene, could not ease his burden, yet she felt every tremor of pain and fatigue that passed through him. Her chest tightened as she saw the strain on his face, the trembling of his legs, and the sweat beading on his forehead. She realized in that quiet, heavy moment that he suffered for her without reason, without obligation, and without reward. Her heart ached with gratitude and guilt, knowing she had never asked for this, yet someone had willingly offered it. Hours passed. The chamber seemed to stretch into eternity. The first physical trial ended, but Adam's challenges were far from over. The next stage involved isolation. The lights dimmed further, leaving him in near-complete darkness. The sound of the station faded, replaced by the emptiness of the chamber. It was meant to confuse the mind, to make the punished question reality, to tempt them to surrender. Adam's breathing became the loudest sound he could hear. He counted each inhale, each exhale, grounding himself in his body, reminding himself that he had chosen this path and that he could endure it. Observers began to murmur quietly among themselves. Some leaned closer to their screens, unable to tear their eyes away from the scene. Aliens who had never interacted with humans before studied his movements with fascination. How could one so small, so seemingly fragile, survive such trials? Even Lena's brothers, who had trained in the harshest conditions imaginable, watched in stunned silence. Their skepticism had not disappeared, but they were beginning to recognize a strange, unfamiliar strength in him, strength not of muscle but of will. Adam's mind was tested next. A series of puzzles and obstacles required him to make decisions under pressure while his body was fatigued. Lights flashed unexpectedly. Sounds shifted in volume and direction. Simple tasks became complicated, then nearly impossible. His mind wanted to give in. His body screamed for rest. Every instinct told him to stop. But he focused on Lena. He focused on her face, her fear, her trust in him. He imagined the relief on her face when this ended. And he endured. By the middle of the night, fatigue weighed heavily on him. His legs shook, and his hands cramped against the restraint bands. He stumbled once but caught himself. Pain coursed through his muscles and sweat ran down his temples, yet he kept moving, kept focusing, kept breathing. Every second became a test of persistence, every breath a victory over surrender. The chamber had become a crucible and he would not break. Lena's feelings were a storm of emotion. Fear, awe, gratitude, and helplessness churned within her. She wanted to rush forward, to grab his hand, to tell him it would be okay. But she could do nothing. She could only watch, silent, holding her chest as though to keep her heart from breaking. She realized how brave he truly was, how far beyond her understanding his courage went. She had heard of humans being brave, but she had never witnessed it in this raw, selfless form. The judges noted his progress, their earlier expectations of failure slowly dissolving. They whispered among themselves, debating quietly. Some were amazed, others wary. Their assumption had been that no human could endure this level of strain, yet here was one, standing, enduring, refusing to yield. It was unprecedented. Hours blurred together. Adam faced every challenge with quiet determination. The chamber became hotter in some moments, colder in others. The floor shifted again, subtly, each movement designed to test balance and reaction. Each obstacle seemed small on its own, but together they formed a continuous trial with no rest. He began to feel the effects of exhaustion, but he reminded himself why he was there. Every step forward was for Lena, every moment of endurance a message that courage and empathy were stronger than fear and cruelty. At some point, the chamber introduced the next phase, a trial of sensory manipulation. The lights flickered rapidly, disorienting him. Sounds echoed strangely, alternating between silence and loud pulses that made concentration nearly impossible. He could feel the pull of panic in his mind, the whisper of surrender, but he refused. He focused on breathing. He focused on counting his steps. He focused on Lena. Observers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even seasoned aliens found the humans' resolve unsettling. They were used to endurance measured in hours or even days, but this human carried a quiet, unyielding strength that defied their expectations. Some whispered quietly to each other about the surprising resilience of the human species. Others avoided eye contact, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Lena's brothers were tense. They had watched many trials, had faced countless dangers, but this human's courage unsettled them. They had always believed that strength came from training, from history, from lineage. And yet here was a human with no knowledge of their ways, enduring the impossible simply out of principle, simply out of choice. They realized that courage did not belong to one species alone, and a slow, begrudging respect began to take root in their hearts. Adam's body ached. His joints screamed. His muscles burned. Sweat streamed down his face, soaking his simple clothing. But still he moved. Still he endured. He relied not on strength alone, but on focus, on purpose, on determination. He reminded himself constantly of why he had taken this punishment. Every pain, every struggle, every moment of exhaustion was a testament to his choice, his empathy, and his courage. The night pressed on. Shadows lengthened. The chamber seemed endless. Every second felt like an hour. But Adam endured. He moved with purpose, with intent, and with unshakable will. His body quivered. His mind whispered surrender. Yet he ignored the voice, kept his gaze forward, and kept moving. Lena's emotions shifted as the night continued. At first she had felt fear and shock. Then she felt awe. Then, as he continued without faltering, she felt hope. The human's endurance had become more than physical. It had become a symbol of something greater. It was a message that courage, empathy, and selflessness could defy expectation. That one being could stand for another, even against impossible odds. She could not stop watching, her hands clenching into fists, her eyes wide with wonder. By the early hours of the morning, Adam's movements slowed, but they never stopped. He had endured every trial the chamber offered. He had faced isolation, pressure, mental strain, physical challenge, and sensory manipulation. Each had tested him to his limits, and yet he remained standing. Sweat dripped from his hair. His legs wobbled. His body ached. But he was alive. He was unbroken. The judges watched silently, their earlier confidence shaken. They had expected failure. They had expected the human to break quickly, to fall under pressure, to prove the superiority of their own species. And yet he had endured. Not because of strength alone, but because of choice, because of empathy, because of determination. They realized quietly that this human had shown a strength they had never anticipated. Lena's brothers leaned forward, staring at the screens. Their initial skepticism had given way to awe. They whispered to one another, acknowledging silently that the human had achieved what they believed impossible. They had expected failure. And yet here was proof that courage could transcend species, that determination could defy expectation, that empathy could create strength beyond measure. Adam's gaze remained steady. He did not look at Lena, though he could feel her presence watching him. He focused on his own movements, his own breath, his own purpose. He reminded himself constantly that he had chosen this trial. He had chosen to endure it. And he would see it through no matter the cost. As dawn approached, the chamber remained tense. Adam's endurance had lasted through the night. He had faced every challenge, every trial, every moment of despair, and he had remained standing. Observers whispered quietly, Lena watched with tears in her eyes, and the judges studied him with new respect. The impossible had been done. A human had endured what no one had thought possible. And in that quiet, dim chamber, as the first artificial light of morning touched his face, Adam took one final, steadying breath. He had endured the night, and in doing so, he had proven something far greater than the trial itself. He had proven the quiet, unyielding strength of humanity. Morning arrived slowly on the station, the artificial sun rising in pale yellow light that washed over the metal walls of the chamber. The court was quiet, still heavy with the weight of the night. The darkness of punishment had ended, but the tension in the air remained. The observers, the judges, and everyone present waited, uncertain what they would see next. Some expected failure, some expected collapse, and some dared to hope that the human had endured. Adam stood in the center of the chamber, his body trembling from exhaustion. His legs shook with fatigue, his arms ached, and sweat had soaked his simple clothing. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. Every breath felt like it might be his last. Yet despite all of this, he was still standing. He was still upright. He was still alive. And in that moment, more than anything, he was unbroken. The judges returned to the chamber, their robes flowing silently behind them. They expected to see defeat, to pronounce failure, to show the court that humans were weak and that punishment could not be transferred successfully. But what they saw was something unexpected. Adam's posture was strained, his face pale, his eyes heavy with fatigue, but he was alive. He had survived the night, endured the trials, and refused to yield. Their eyes widened in surprise, some narrowing in suspicion, others softening in reluctant respect. Lena stood in the observation area, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide. She could hardly believe what she saw. For hours she had watched the trials, had imagined the pain and fear that Adam must have suffered, and had prepared herself for the worst. Yet here he was, standing, exhausted but resolute. Her heart leapt with gratitude, relief, and awe. She realized fully in that moment that he had given everything he had to protect her, to spare her from suffering. And she understood deeply that humans were capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The observers in the chamber reacted in quiet murmurs. Aliens who had overseen countless trials exchanged glances, some whispering to one another, others simply shaking their heads in disbelief. They had expected failure. They had assumed that a human, a species known to be physically weaker than their own, would falter quickly under the strain of punishment. And yet Adam had endured. He had faced every trial with courage, with determination, and with a will that refused to break. The judges began to deliberate quietly. They spoke in low tones, discussing the implications of what they had witnessed. One of the senior judges leaned forward, resting a hand on the table, and said, "This is unprecedented. No one has survived the full trial without yielding. A human, enduring like this, it changes our understanding." Another judge nodded slowly, their eyes still fixed on Adam. "It is not merely physical strength," they said. "It is willpower, endurance, and purpose. It is courage. And it has carried him through." Lena's brothers, watching from afar, remained silent. The oldest of them whispered under his breath, "He has done what none of us expected." The middle brother frowned, his eyes narrowing, but there was a glimmer of respect in his gaze. The youngest brother remained quiet, simply observing, as though trying to absorb the full weight of what had happened. They had expected a human to fail. They had expected punishment to fall as it should. And yet, here was proof that courage could transcend species. That determination could defy expectation. That empathy could create a strength far beyond physical ability. Adam's body trembled with exhaustion, but he did not collapse. He bent slightly to catch his breath, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His muscles ached, his head spun, and every fiber of his being begged for rest. But he forced himself to remain upright. He reminded himself that he had chosen this path, that he had accepted this trial to protect another. Every second he stood was a testament to his will, his empathy, and his courage. The judges called the court to order. Silence fell once again. They cleared their throats and spoke in measured tones, their eyes scanning the chamber. "The charges against Lena are hereby dismissed," the senior judge announced. The words echoed through the chamber. Lena's eyes widened and she gasped softly. Relief washed over her in a wave so strong that she had to take a moment to steady herself. She had been spared the punishment, saved by a human she barely knew, yet who had risked everything for her. The chamber remained tense, though the atmosphere had shifted. The judges ended the trial without ceremony, a quiet acknowledgement of the unprecedented events of the night. They were shaken not by fear but by respect, by endurance, by the simple, undeniable proof that courage could appear in forms they had never anticipated. The observers began to murmur among themselves, some in awe, some in disbelief, but all carrying the same silent recognition of what had been achieved. Adam finally allowed himself to breathe fully. He had endured, survived, and emerged unbroken. His body was trembling and his mind was weary, but he felt a quiet sense of triumph. He had faced the impossible and had not faltered. He had kept his promise to Lena, had borne the punishment meant for her, and had proven, in his own quiet way, the strength of humanity. Lena stepped forward cautiously, approaching Adam through the observation channel. Her hands trembled as she reached out, her voice soft and filled with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. Her eyes glistened with tears, and she could not stop the small smile that spread across her face. Adam met her gaze and gave a faint nod, too tired to speak, yet his eyes conveyed understanding, empathy, and quiet pride. The judges watched this brief exchange silently. They noted the human's calm endurance, his unshakable determination, and his empathy for another being. For the first time, they questioned their assumptions about humanity. They had believed that strength was measured only in force, in power, in history and lineage. But now they saw another kind of strength, the quiet courage to stand for another, the endurance to face what others cannot, and the moral resolve to act when no law demanded it. The chamber slowly emptied as the trial concluded. Observers left quietly, still whispering among themselves. Some avoided Adam's gaze, unsure how to process the profound endurance they had witnessed. Others paused to watch him, respect shining in their eyes. Lena remained, her heart full of gratitude and admiration, unable to look away. She realized that she would never forget this night, this human, and the courage he had shown. Far away, her brothers remained silent, reflecting on what had happened. Their initial anger and disbelief had transformed into respect and quiet admiration. They had expected weakness. They had expected failure. And yet, here was proof that courage, endurance, and empathy could surpass every expectation. One human had stood where no one else could, and in doing so, had challenged their understanding of strength and honor. Adam finally stepped out of the trial chamber. His legs were stiff, his body sore, and his mind exhausted, but his spirit remained intact. Every breath was a victory, every step a testament to his endurance. The chamber felt different now, quieter, heavier with understanding, and somehow lighter too because the punishment had ended and humanity had proven its worth. Lena approached him cautiously, her hands trembling as she reached for his. You saved me," she said softly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with gratitude. Adam nodded faintly. He had no words, no grand declarations. His actions had spoken louder than words ever could. He had endured the night, protected another, and remained unbroken. The judges, standing silently, observed the exchange. They were not angry nor disappointed nor dismissive. They were thoughtful, quiet, and deeply aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Their rules had been followed, their expectations challenged, and their assumptions overturned. A single human had endured the impossible, and it had changed their understanding forever. Observers left the chamber slowly, each carrying the story with them. The whispers spread, first quietly, then more boldly, until every corner of the station knew of the human who had taken the punishment meant for another and survived. They spoke of courage, endurance, and the unexpected strength of humanity. The tale of Adam's night would be remembered, not for fear, not for shame, but for honor, empathy, and quiet, unshakable bravery. Even as the sun rose fully over the station, casting light over the metal floors and walls, Adam remained standing, catching his breath, his body aching, yet his spirit unbroken. He had faced the impossible and endured. He had kept his promise, proven his courage, and shown the strength of humanity in a way no one would forget. Lena stayed by his side, her gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. Together they left the chamber, moving through the corridors of the station. Each step was slow, deliberate, careful, but filled with quiet triumph. The trial had ended, the charges had been dismissed, and a story had been written in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. And somewhere in the halls of the station her brothers watched, silent but changed forever. Respect, admiration, and a new understanding of courage settled over them. They had learned that strength was not only in battle, not only in history, but in choice, in empathy, and in the quiet endurance to stand for another, no matter the cost. The trial ended without ceremony. No grand announcements, no fanfare. But in the quiet aftermath, the impact of what had occurred was undeniable. Humanity had proven its worth, its courage, and its resilience. A human had endured the impossible, protected another, and remained unbroken. And in that quiet, simple truth, the station and its inhabitants learned something they would never forget. Lena's brothers arrived at the station not long after the trial had ended. They were warriors of great renown, feared across countless star systems. Their reputations were built on strength, skill, and unwavering discipline. When they stepped into the chamber, the air seemed to shift. Even the judges, who had witnessed countless trials, paused for a moment. The presence of these warriors was commanding. Their armor gleamed under the artificial lights, and their expressions were serious, watchful, and alert. Every step they took resonated through the hall, each movement precise and measured. Lena watched them approach, her heart pounding. She felt both pride and anxiety. Pride that her family, her protectors, were finally here, and anxiety because she knew the weight of what had occurred. Adam, the human who had endured the impossible, was still standing, exhausted and weary yet resolute. He had faced the night, taken the punishment meant for her, and survived. She wondered how her brothers would react. Would they be angry? Would they demand recompense? Would they challenge Adam for daring to step in on her behalf? The eldest brother stepped forward first. His eyes scanned the chamber, taking in the exhausted figure of Adam. There was silence for a moment, long and heavy, as if the entire universe had paused to witness what would happen next. The middle brother followed, his expression unreadable. The youngest brother, usually the calmest, trailed slightly behind, his hands clenched but relaxed at his sides. Without a word, all three brothers stopped a few feet from Adam. They did not shout, they did not gesture angrily, and they did not demand anything. Instead, in a single fluid motion they bent at the waist and lowered their heads in a deep bow. It was a gesture of honor, respect, and acknowledgement, a silent way of saying that the debt owed could never be repaid in gold or words, but only through recognition of courage. The sound of their armor shifting was the only noise that broke the silence. Adam did not flinch. He had seen the bow, but he did not respond. He had no words to offer, no ceremonies to perform. He understood the meaning. The gesture was enough. It was a rare honor, and he accepted it quietly, without fanfare, without need for acknowledgement. His eyes met Lena's briefly. He offered a faint nod, a small signal that he had done what he had set out to do. He had endured. He had survived. And he had proven that courage and empathy could surpass expectation, culture, and even fear. The judges watched quietly from their seats, still recovering from the events of the night. They had witnessed Adam endure what no one had expected, and now they were watching the bow of the legendary warriors. The significance of the moment was not lost on them. It was rare for honor to be demonstrated so purely, so powerfully, without words, without threats, and without violence. Adam's actions had challenged their understanding of strength, and the warrior's gesture had confirmed it. Respect had been earned. Lena stepped forward slowly. Her hands trembled and her eyes were bright with tears. She felt a mixture of pride, relief, and deep gratitude. Her brothers had bowed to a human, a being outside their family, outside their species, yet someone who had carried their daughter's burden when no one else would. It was a moment she would remember forever. She reached out a hand toward Adam, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you," she whispered. It was not enough, but it was all she could say. Adam extended his hand, helping Lena to her feet. He did not speak. Words were not needed. The night had been long, the punishment severe, but his purpose had been fulfilled. Lena rose slowly, steadying herself with his support. The chamber seemed lighter now, the tension lifted. The silence that had hung over the trial was replaced with an understanding that went deeper than words. Courage, endurance, and honor had been demonstrated. The brothers remained bowed for a long moment, silently acknowledging the human who had done what they themselves might never have attempted. They recognized the debt owed, not in anger or demand but in respect. It was a rare gesture, a form of acknowledgement that went beyond family, beyond culture, beyond species. They understood fully that Adam's actions had saved Lena, had spared her suffering, and had upheld the honor of her family in a way that no one else could. As the moment stretched, Adam gently released Lena's hands. She stood beside him, her breath steadying, her tears drying slowly. She looked at her brothers, who remained in their respectful bow, and then back at Adam. For a moment, the three of them, the human and the siblings, stood together in quiet acknowledgement, each understanding the significance of what had occurred. It was a moment outside of language, outside of custom, but fully understood by all present. Observers who had remained in the chamber during the bow now spoke softly among themselves. Aliens and humans alike whispered about the courage displayed by one human and the honor displayed by the alien warriors. The story of Adam's endurance and the subsequent acknowledgement by Lena's brothers would spread across the station quickly. It would be told in hushed tones, repeated in messages, and remembered for years. A single human had faced what many believed impossible, and he had done it not for himself, but for another. Adam turned slightly, looking down at the floor, his mind still processing the night's events. His body ached, his muscles screamed, and fatigue threatened to pull him down. Yet he walked steadily, each step measured, supporting Lena lightly as they moved toward the exit. He did not boast. He did not speak of what he had endured. He had acted out of choice, out of empathy, and the night's events were enough for him. Words were not needed to prove what he had accomplished. Lena followed closely, her hand brushing his lightly, feeling the strength that had carried him through the night. She thought about what she had witnessed. The courage, the endurance, the quiet heroism of a human who had risked everything for someone he barely knew. She realized that the story of this night would remain with her forever, a story not of fear, punishment, or pain, but of selflessness, bravery, and honor. The brothers finally straightened from their bow, their expressions solemn but filled with newfound respect. They approached Lena, placing a hand on her shoulders, and then glanced at Adam. No words were spoken. The gesture was enough. They had recognized the truth. Adam had demonstrated courage, endurance, and empathy that transcended species, expectations, and even their own experience as warriors. The judges, still seated, observed in quiet contemplation. They had anticipated a formal ending to the trial, but instead they had witnessed something far greater. They had seen a human endure the impossible, protect another without obligation, and earn the silent respect of alien warriors. The chamber, the station, and the very system of rules had been quietly transformed by a single act of courage. As Adam and Lena walked away, the story of the night began to spread. Observers carried the tale, sharing it with their peers, recounting the endurance, the honor, and the courage that had been displayed. It became more than a trial. It became a legend, a lesson that strength is not measured solely by power or lineage, but by choice, empathy, and the willingness to stand for another. The corridors of the station were quiet as they moved. Adam's steps were slow, careful, but steady. Lena walked beside him, leaning lightly on him for support. Every movement was deliberate, every step a reminder of what had been endured. The chamber behind them had witnessed courage and honor that would never be forgotten. The whispers and glances of those left behind confirmed it. Lena's brothers followed at a distance, their expressions thoughtful. They did not speak, did not question, and did not challenge. They had witnessed the impossible and recognized it fully. Respect and honor had been earned, and their acknowledgement required no words. In the quiet understanding of their gaze, Adam and Lena knew that the events of the night had changed the perception of humans, courage, and honor forever. Adam paused at the exit, glancing back one last time at the chamber. It was empty now, silent, but it carried the echoes of the night's events. He had endured, he had survived, and he had proven the strength of choice, the power of empathy, and the courage of the human spirit. He felt no pride, only quiet satisfaction. The act had been necessary, and it had been completed. Lena squeezed his hand gently, a silent thank you that carried more weight than any words could. Together they stepped out into the station corridors, leaving behind the trial, the chamber, and the story that would live on. Observers would retell it, students would study it, and warriors would remember it. Adam had become more than a human in their eyes. He had become a symbol of courage and selflessness. And as they walked, Lena's brothers silently followed, acknowledging the debt of honor that had been paid. They did not need to speak. Their bow, their respect, and their presence said everything. They had recognized the human who had endured the impossible, protected another, and stood unbroken. Adam helped Lena along, steadying her with his strength, while the station around them slowly returned to normal. But the memory of the night, the endurance, the courage, and the honor would never fade. It would live in stories, whispers, and the hearts of those who witnessed it. And as they disappeared down the corridor, leaving the chamber behind, the station itself seemed to acknowledge what had happened. A single human had endured what no one expected, had protected another, and had earned respect that transcended species. It was a quiet triumph, a story of courage, empathy, and honor that would never be forgotten. Adam did not speak, and Lena did not ask him to. Words were unnecessary. Their actions, their endurance, and their courage had spoken louder than anything that could be said. They had faced the impossible, endured it, and walked away together, leaving behind a legend that would echo through the station for years to come. And in the stillness that followed, the station and all who had witnessed the events of the night understood one simple truth. Courage and honor are not bound by species, strength, or expectation. They are defined by choice, by empathy, and by the willingness to stand for another when it matters most.